shining on my head. As you're aware, the budget is on Friday, and so I shall spend a few minutes talking about the thinking going behind or guiding the preparation of the budget rather than getting too involved in the measures themselves. But before I do so, let me say I've not been having press conferences lately, and I saw a number of people calling, friendly people, to find out if I'm well, including people from the media. I guess they're responding to the numerous social media posts, particularly by some people who are not my well-wishers, that something is wrong with me, and therefore I've not been in the public domain. Let me say clearly that this is a conscious decision. I had indicated years ago, when the media was incessant and questioned me all the time about the role that I played, why I hosted press conferences so often as leader of the opposition, and I indicated to them that that was my role at that time as General Secretary of the party and leader of the opposition. My job was to lead the fight to dispose of the corrupt government we had at that time. And that once the government is installed, my role will change. You will see the president more often, and you have been seeing him a lot more often. Those who were questioning why Air Finale did not do a lot of engagements with the media, although he was busy in the fields in the period running up to the elections. Now you see our president every day almost in the media. I understand my role at different times, and I'm very happy with doing some technical work now, which I miss dearly, because I've had to deal with APNU and the silliness for a very long time. And it was frankly boring to me, but it was a necessity in that period. Now I've spent several months getting back involved in technical issues, and I love it. And so this doesn't necessitate me being in the public domain a lot. So that is all that took place. It's nothing else. So I want all of the people who've been contacting me, or well-wishers and stuff, who've been overloading my WhatsApp, are you okay, we're not seeing you, etc., that I'm here, and I'm working, but it's for different tasks now to make the government successful. That is my role. One of my roles is to ensure that our government is successful. So let me quickly take you through some of the key themes of the budget that will be presented by Ashni Singh on Friday. This budget shall be a continuation of the framework that we've established in opposition, the framework that was reflected largely in our manifesto. And that framework had a few key objectives, and so we'll remain faithful to those objectives. And every budget over the next several years that you would see coming out of the PPP civic government, these budgets will all advance us closer to those goals that we have established. And so one of the key features of the analyses that we did is that the APNU AFC had an economic policy that was neither pro-poor nor pro-private sector. And therefore, they instituted, in fact, they instituted a number of measures that cause major deterioration in the welfare of our people, as well as to cause a deterioration in the environment for job creation and private sector growth. It was not just a philosophical problem with helping poor people or helping the private sector. They actually had an aggressive plan to dismantle social safety features that we had put in place for several years that led to the improvement of the welfare of many Guyanese. And so we made it clear from the beginning that we will dismantle all of those policies that affected poor people that they put in place. In the last budget, you saw an effective dismantling of many of the tax measures that affected poor people. So, for example, we remove the value-added tax on a whole range of items that poor people use. On the productive side, that's on the consumer side. On the productive side, we took back land rental charges to the rates that were there in the pre-2015 elections period, so as to ensure that our productive sector got more help. I'm not going to enumerate the long list of measures that we put in place in the last budget to dismantle a lot of those policies that were negatively affecting our people. Just to say that if you annualize those benefits, they would exceed 40 billion Guyana dollars. That means that the tax measures in the last budget, we didn't have a full year effect of them as yet because they were put in place in September. Well, effectively November, because the budget was passed at the end of September. So you only had a 3 months period in which people benefited from those measures. But if you annualize them, those measures, it will be in excess of $40 billion. So you have to understand we are starting a second budget now, coming less than 5 months after the last budget was passed. And we have to build on those incentives that we gave in the last budget. The second area that we recognize in our manifesto that we had to address is an expansion of the productive sector and assisting the ailing economy, the non-oil economy, to resume productive health. And this was largely because the policies of APNU that they instituted was affecting production in mining, in construction, in agriculture. Almost every sector was on the decline, even in the pre-COVID era. And we recognize that if we allow the oil sector to dominate our economy, we will suffer the same fate as many oil economies around the world, which is a lack of diversification, with the Dutch disease killing off every other sector of the economy. And then when oil prices fall, we're going to suffer the same fate like Trinidad and Tobago or Venezuela or many of these countries that have a very difficult time fiscally but also societally in addressing those issues. So this budget will, apart from continuing to dismantle some of the policies that APNU put in place that were harming the private sector and poor people, it would also create incentives for the expansion of the productive base of our economy in the non-oil sector. The third area of broad focus will be that it will create an enabling environment, both fiscally and in terms of regulations or the lack of bureaucracy, red tape for job-creating activities. And it will directly support many initiatives, not just in the major organized private sector, but also in small business, hoping to incubate new entrepreneurs and assisting them directly through government grants or soft loans, etc., into getting into production and into the productive base. The fourth area of major focus in the budget would be supportive infrastructure, both for the productive sectors. So if we're going to have to open up more lands in the intermediate savannas because we want new industries, say corn and soya production there to support our stock feed industry, and this is what we're discussing now, to open up the intermediate savannas for production. It means we have to build the supporting infrastructure, at least to get the road done. You've heard about several other projects. The President himself has mentioned some projects that will assist the private sector by opening, not just private sector, but a productive sector by opening up new lands. The 48 to Kanji Road will open up tens of thousands of acres of new land in Berbice. The road to Bartica, connecting Bartica, which we are hoping to do before the end of the year, that would also support the productive sector as well ease of travel for people who live in those areas. You've seen the President tour an area on the East Bank. We're very worried about the congestion, and as the road, the project to do the bypass starting from Ogle here, that project may start around August, September of this year. We're in the process of contracting through the Indian loan, the contractors. But even before then, you'll have money in the budget to do another 4-lane road connecting Mandela with Eccles. And so you'd have, apart from the 4-lane coming into the city, the existing 4-lane, you'd have another 4-lane there, and then when the bypass comes, another 4-lane to connect the East Bank, which would help to kill some of the traffic congestion there and allow for massive growth of industries and housing development along the East Bank corridor, pushing it even further than the existing settlements. So a lot of those things we'll see them reflected in the budget. They've already been in the public domain, but there is a thinking behind, a philosophy behind all of this. They all fit together as part of a holistic plan for the development of various sectors, and not just for industry and supporting infrastructure for industry, but also for the ease of travel and for settlement patterns and all of these to grow. Another main area of focus will be on how we mitigate the impact on the economy and people's lives because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so there will be resources dedicated to the budget. You have already heard about our efforts to source vaccines. And we're hoping, although it will be on a purely voluntary basis, but we're hoping that before the end of the year, that all Guyanese can be vaccinated. And we're hoping it would be done much earlier, but at least to have that as an outside date to have our people vaccinated. It's going to be costly, and it will take a lot of effort, but we have to do this. We don't have a choice but to get this done. And so all efforts are being made in that regard. Then you're going to see also, consistent with our manifesto promise, another area of focus will be the acceleration of capital projects and other major transformative projects in the private sector, all with the aim of creating more jobs and more income and welfare and a diversified economy. So energy will be crucial. That's a major sector, and we have gone after this. That's a lot of my time has been spent on this, looking at moving this forward. As you know, I can deal with it, but I might as well talk about it here now. A little bit later, the gas to energy project, as we are now in the process of already hiring people for the studies. There'll be 4 sets of studies done that will move the process forward. And I've seen a lot of adverse comments, oh, we're running ahead with the project without examining it carefully. Let me make it clear that we have had internal assessments of various sites for landing the pipeline. The site that was preferred by where the Greenfield Mahaika area, we could not proceed with that because the land was privately owned, and I think the project was deliberately stalled in 2016 to allow people to acquire those lands. Then you had some other suggestions that the project may go to Crab Island, or alternately Ogle and some other areas here on the East Coast. When we got into office, we made a conscious decision that we will not bring this, the gas to energy project into Region 4, into Ogle or the East Bank, because that corridor is set for major development. First of all, the price of the land is extremely high, and a lot of the industries that we have to place around the oil and gas facility might be industries that are a bit polluting. And therefore, to bring that into this, so close to the city and the population center will be disastrous. And given the protests that we've had about the establishment on the East Bank of these chemical facilities, we thought it best to explore 2 options. Where you have large virgin lands and low population density at Wales because of the closure there, and the Crab Island area. And so in the assessment, it was found that the Wales site is a better site, less costly. And now we're in the process of mapping, creating a master plan for the development of the area at Wales that would involve deciding where the pipeline would terminate, where the gas drying facilities would be, where the power plant should be located, what are the industries that we need around the area, and you have to decide that because some of the steam from depending on what kind of power plant we use, we may have to use the steam coming out of the power plant to support other industries. Then a wider area for the establishment maybe of these essential industries, but that may be chemical industries far away from where people live. All of these things are being done now at this point in time, a master plan for the area. We are also looking at a Wales Development Authority. We'll make a decision whether these industries are going to be under the Wales Development Authority or alternately fall directly under central government, and the Wales Development Authority will look at new types of industries, diversification and job creation, etc. So all of that is being done now. Then the studies that are being, so no pipeline is being built now. I saw some people, some weird environmentalists saying, the pipeline, it's a criminal to have the pipeline being built, etc. So several studies are in the process of being contracted. There's a geophysical study, geotechnical studies, LiDAR studies, and also environmental impact study. When those are completed, or when they're nearing completion, the design will be done for the pipeline, consistent with those studies, the findings of the studies. And only then, after all of this has been done, then we'll move forward to the construction phase of the pipeline. So we are a good year and possibly a year and a half away from constructing any pipeline. The studies that should have been done since 2016 have not been done. But the pipeline construction itself is 18 months, 2 years. So that's why we're setting a realistic target of about mid-2023 or maybe to the end of 2023 for the completion of the pipeline. Separate to that, when we decide where exactly the pipeline will terminate, then we will decide how we go out to tender for the construction of the power plant. We can only await that. We can only do that when we know exactly where the pipeline will terminate and the drying facility would be established, consistent with the master plan that I spoke of earlier. So this has all been carefully done, and the energy project is moving forward. Separately, the last time I spoke, which was several months ago, I told you we were working on renewable energies too, and getting a lot of the smaller projects off. A lot of them have already been tendered and awaiting construction for many of the systems that are not connected to the grid, Bartica, Letem, Wakanam, Leg 1, all of these places. But we have now decided to move forward with solar, large-scale solar development, and we'd be utilizing money that Guyana earned on the GRIF, the Norwegian agreement. That was since a long time back, 8, 9 years ago, to fund those. And so Essequibo now currently is 6 megawatts of power. That's peak. So we have to decide a solar unit maybe of 6 to 8 megawatts in Essequibo. Linden uses about 12 megawatts now. We have to decide maybe between 12 to 15 megawatts, but those two systems are being designed now. One for Linden, a huge solar farm for Linden, and a huge solar farm for Essequibo, whilst we're still looking at the other areas for improvement. So energy is crucial, and you will see a major advancement of that in the course of the year. Another issue is Telecoms Reform. So because we want to get to 5G services across Guyana. We want to get to 5G services and improvement. We have had an entire look at NDMA. Our findings are not very pleasing about what the agency did. They really, both on the GRIF project, that is the hinterland telecommunication project that we had left 17.2 million US for. They've spent through this is being administered by UNDP and a unit in the government, but NDMA was providing technical assistance to that project. But on their core project and the smart city project with Huawei and other issues, we have not seen much activism. They had a ton of people just sitting around, being paid without doing anything. Absolutely anything there. And so we have to restructure the government telecommunication agency. We have to make sure that it's goal-oriented. We're right now working on a master plan, an ICT master plan for the country, on which and then we have to decide the infrastructure, the platforms, the apps that we would use so that they're consistent with each other and allow the sharing. So that's being worked on now. We have a small unit to start looking at this, and you will see major restructuring there. On the other hand, on the private telecom side, we made it clear that we've opened up the sector. We'll give anyone permission who wants to land a fiber optic cable in Guyana. Any person who wants to do that will get permission to do so. So totally open. That we have an issue still with spectrum because a lot inefficient use of the spectrum. A lot of the telecom companies now, existing ones, are using spectrum space that they're not licensed for. And so you'd have a proper spectrum planning done. We're looking at proper interconnect agreements. And there's one thing, a single number that people could have, and that it's a portable number. So you can move across carriers with your one number. So if you decide to switch carriers, you have your same number. This would allow consumers to have greater control, so they don't lose their number. If they decide to switch carrier, they get a better deal, etc. There are lots of other reforms that we're working on there, but clearly we have to bring this into telecoms, into the 21st century. What now we have is a situation where I think they're doing some drumming there. So you can give me some coffee there. You guys give me some coffee. Yeah, give me just a good break to get my coffee too. They can continue drumming a bit more. So yes. So those are the big things that we're working on, and you will see an advancement on them. I must say that we have had really good engagements. You've heard a lot about the people who express interest on hotel construction. We've had about 6 of those that are serious and project ready, almost project ready. So we believe in the course of the year, you would see several of these new hotels started. So we've also spent a lot of time working with these companies. So that's another big area of the focus, the budget focus, where we want to move things to the modern age. And then, of course, reestablishing our green credentials. So I don't want to belabor this point, but the expansion of the LCDS I spoke about, we're already working on several areas to do this. The Department of Environment and Climate Change has been working on this along with some other working groups into the blue economy, the maritime economy, biodiversity, water management issues, sale of ecosystem services, all of these things it's evolving. So this quite a bit of work will be done this year in these sectors to move things forward. So generally, I'm not going to speak about like the initiatives, because you're going to hear the minister speak a lot about the initiatives, and there'll be quite a few social sector type initiatives too. I just want you to understand that our stimulus to the economy, because we've really struggled to get, because of the COVID-19, to get the dynamism back into the economy. You recall that the economy was already faltering under APNU in the pre-COVID period. Over 30,000 people had lost their jobs. And then with COVID compounding that, we had possibly another 30,000 people, maybe more than 30,000, losing jobs. So you have a large amount of our workforce out there without jobs. And so that is why we had to take the tough decision to start opening up a bit, getting people back to work. But really, because of the need to be careful, you can't really get the economy working at full steam yet, and until we get over this pandemic. So we have really struggled, and that has had implications for the budget too, because you would recall that we gave up, as I said, $40 billion in revenue that goes back into people's pockets based on tax measures last year. We have had to expand spending because of COVID. And so if we're not careful, what will happen is that the deficit would widen a lot. And it's because of it that we have to continue borrowing. We were hoping to shrink the borrowing, but we have to continue. So you would have seen the minister raising the debt ceiling. And the debt ceiling has been raised to facilitate this, but more importantly, to accommodate the 90-something billion dollars of overdraft that APNU had at the central bank. So we now have to convert these into formal debt instruments to free up the balance sheet of the central bank. And that is one of the reasons why the debt ceiling had to be raised. So we have to be very conscious of our spending now, that it doesn't affect the rest of the accounts, the macro accounts, because you just can't have an unsustainable fiscal account without it impacting on the financial accounts or the external accounts, that is BOP, of the country. So all of these have to be carefully managed in this period, but I just want you to understand that the money that we've been putting in the economy is a different form of stimulus. We just didn't give the tax measures, which have a longer lead time, to help the private sector. But we also, through the COVID assistance alone, we have pumped over $7 billion into the economy. We have had nearly 314,000 persons receiving already the COVID assistance. We have the Georgetown is now ongoing. All of the other areas, East Coast, East Bank, and all the other regions have been completed, except in Georgetown. That will go to the end. And then we will look at still the pink forms. For many people, remember there was one per household check, and then others in the household were given a pink form to fill up. We would go back and investigate if those are legitimate families, separate families, and they too will get their grant once we complete the first round of the process. But that put over $7.8 billion into the economy directly into people's hands. So that was the form of stimulus that we used in the early period to get some life back. Just from measures last year, 2 measures, for example, that we announced in last year's budget that will kick in from January 1. The pensioners increased by about 25%. That is about $5,000 more, moving from about $20,000 to $25,000 a month, old age pension. Will put about $4.4 billion more into the economy, the pockets of the pensioners, annualized. And then the return of the grant and the increase, the cash grant for school kids that they used to get, the $10,000 that APNU took away. That $15,000 now will work out to another 2.5, almost $7 billion, just those 2 initiatives that people did not get last year that they will get this year. That's in the pockets of parents and pensioners. So I just want you to remember these things, because the budget, as I said before, is a continuum. It's part of the overall plan for the future. Now, let me turn to the petroleum sector. So I seen stuff about us not having a daily report in the newspapers, I think. So there is a daily report from Exxon Mobil, the producers, to the ministry. I'm going to share with you, and I hope you can all share this among yourselves, what that report, a sample of it, that the report we get. It shows the amount of oil produced, the water production, wastewater and all of that, gas production for the day, the total water to inject that they re-inject and stuff like that, and the gas that is re-injected. So it's a report, a daily report on this that comes into the ministry, and I think it's shared with the EPA. So we do have daily reports here. The issue, how do we evolve this now? What is the issue here? We have to build a capability which might take a little while to verify. And that is what we're exploring now, to see if through remote means we can verify that this is accurate. So we do get the daily report, but we have to build that capability. It is a bit costly we had some proposals from people. It's a bit costly, but there's no avoiding it. In the future, we have to do this to verify for ourselves that this is accurate. So that's one, because I've seen comments about this issue. 2, the local content policy. So I had indicated on a program that I did on Kaichor Radio that we intended to make public both the report from the advisory group that was put together, that was chaired by Mr. Nocta, had Floyd Haynes, Carl Greenidge, etc. So I think right now that consultation that the president would head on local content policy is programmed for next Monday. And I've asked the Ministry of Natural Resources to put that report up on their website, as well as the draft policy that is derived from that report. And these 2 documents will serve, they will be shared with everyone who's coming to the consultation next Monday, so that they can have all the documents that we are working from. Once we receive the comments from the consultation, then we will probably hire someone to incorporate all of these comments into the final policy document. And then we will issue that, probably have it debated in the Parliament too, and then move to legislation, to using that as the drafting guide for the legislation. So that's on local content policy. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. So that's the second area. On the audit, so as I had explained to you when I last appeared on a public program, that the company that was hired by APNU to do the audit, they were supposed to have 3 deliverables: an initial report, a draft report, and then the final report. They submitted the draft report as the final report in July, 30th of July, I think last year, 2 days before the president was sworn in. So since then, in the first few months, I think we did not pay enough attention to it. So since then, we have had the GRA and the Department of Energy looked at the report. They have submitted their comments to the company that was hired. That company has to send us in a matter of days their final the draft report, which they had said was the final report. Now the draft report, that report has to be sent to ExxonMobil, and then based on their comments, like with any audit, a final report be completed, and that will determine whether we accept all of the expenditure that was made, the pre-contract expenditure, as well as additional expenditure up to 2017. We will then determine, based on that audit, whether all of those costs are consistent with the contract's understanding of what should be deducted as cost oil. And then either have the company, if there is an adverse finding, I gather there has still been some adverse finding, then decide how we move forward. So apart from that, we're already prepared the terms of reference for the new a new contract to be issued that will have to have local content in it to do the audit between 2017 and 2020. And we're working also at building a capability to do this audit. We have to work this year within GRA so that it could be more real time, like in the same year that what the expenditure is made. So that is where we are on the audit. In terms of the other issues, I told you already we're working on the updating the 1986 legislation, Petroleum Act. We still have to get, at some point in time, the Petroleum Commission in place, all of those things, a reform of the Sovereign Wealth Fund. They have not dropped off the radar. We're still working on them, but we're trying to fix some of the other things earlier. So let's talk a bit about the flaring of gas. So this has been in the news for quite a while now. And we have been looking at it, and the EPA has been looking at the flaring issue. Now, clearly, it is unacceptable. As some people have said, oh, the PIARA, I saw some commentators and analysts said that the PIARA license and environmental permit are no different than the LISA permit, and it did not address the situation. That's patently false. Absolutely false. The PIARA permit, I'm not going to go back over it, the PIARA permit and license are enormously different than the LISA license and the LISA permit. And we have demonstrated this. You have copies of them, you see this. For example, cradle-to-grave management of waste is a commitment that the company had to agree to as part of the PIARA environmental permit. That's a huge win for Guyana. Cradle-to-grave management of their waste. That's one. Two, wastewater. They have some standard were set, and it has to be monitored. And there are studies to look at it in the future, maybe future design of other FPSOs. Thirdly, there is a system of fines that have been put in place in the license, the PIARA license, and the PIARA environmental permit for flaring. And flaring is specifically prohibited. We have also gotten Exxon to give $2 million to do a production safety audit. That was not part of the LISA permit. So I can list about 10 new features that are part of the PIARA environmental permit and license that were not part of the LISA permit. So a lot of people have been asking why we can't use the PIARA permit to find ExxonMobil. So the LISA permit now comes to an end, LISA 1, comes to an end in June next year. And we've made it clear that once it comes to an end, the new permit will be issued consistent with the PIARA conditions. That's the future, which involves fines and for flaring. So we've been struggling with one issue, but let me give you some numbers before. So Exxon is flaring using about 16 to 18 million standard cubic feet of cubic feet of gas per day. So the EPA has worked this out, and they said that's about 1.3 kiloton of carbon emitted. That's 1,300 tons of carbon emitted per day. So that is what is happening now. So unlike most people didn't understand, and this was a public document in 2017, Exxon and they submitted an environmental impact assessment for the project. The document was, from what I gather, made public by the EPA, published everywhere. And in that environmental impact assessment, which was approved by the EPA at that time and referred to by the minister in the license, Exxon was given an allowance to flare or to use 14 billion cubic feet, 14 billion cubic feet of gas. 14 billion. So right now, so far, they have flared about 12.5 billion. At the current rate of flaring, by end of April, they would have flared the entire 14 billion cubic feet. And so they had an approved EIA that gave them an allowance of 14 billion cubic feet to flare. This was in the public domain, a document that was in the public domain in 2017, and part of the LISA arrangement. So if we charge, say, $30 per ton, it's about $39,000 per day, US dollars per day fine. Because at 1,300 tons per day, multiplied by $30, you have about nearly 40 million $40,000 per day. Fine, should the fine be instituted at $30 per ton? You know, it depends on what the market is for per ton of carbon. But really, we're struggling with that now, but this is based on information they supplied. Again, the 12.5 billion tons have been flared thus far. So we have to verify this, and we're still examining whether there are other provisions under the EPA Act where we may still be able to fine ExxonMobil for their flaring out there. But this was the issue that hamstrung the EPA. They approved in 2017 an EIA that had 14 billion cubic feet, standard cubic feet of gas, an allowance to be flared. That's what my brief from the EPA said. So we're still in the middle of dealing with this issue. But as I said before, if they continue flaring at this rate, that allowance expires in end of April. And and therefore, if they don't flare it all or so, in any case, by June of next year, they have to come on to the LISA, the PIARA environmental permit. So the marketing of the crude, you know, we had gone out to a tender, and this was another issue that has been in the public domain. So we went out to tender last year, and 29 companies submitted bids. And the evaluation criteria, we believe, that was set by the department resulted in the evaluators having to disqualify 28 of the 29 basically. So they only had one valid bidder, Lukoil. Now, it is almost impossible. Eventually, the tender board said no, and we said no. You cannot, Shell and all of the others were disqualified, although they sold all the shipment, the 3 shipment before. Shell, Hess, BP, all were disqualified because of the nonsensical document that was put out, really. And so you disqualify, it wouldn't mean a competitive arrangement. 28 of the 29. So the last 2 shipments, what we've had to do, we've had to get 3 bids from the Chinook, Exxon, and Hess. And the bid that won was Hess. But so they gave the best terms. And so that is the last shipment. We don't know about the shipment that was done in February. We haven't received the prices as yet, but all of them are selling at the Brent reference. So it's the same place where they're selling, that's the same price. The difference is in marketing, commission, etc. So the first shipment was sold at $55 a barrel. Second, $35. That was May last year. The third was $46 a barrel in August. And then the December one, $49 a barrel. So we are waiting for the numbers from the February shipment. So that is why we had to do. So we are now seeing, because we have had since then some people who have offered to buy the crude directly, so we don't have to pay marketing costs and all of that. So we have assessed those bids. We have had several offers to do that, but we will have to And we have to check that the prices are the same Brent reference and if they're going to add a margin on it. But you'll be briefed about this. But the reason why this was not transparent, as far as we're concerned, you can't disqualify 28 of 29 bidders, especially these people are trading billions of barrels per day. And they have bigger capacity. First, 2 were pre-qualified. Some BB Energy are trading out of the UK and Lukoil. And then the BB Energy was knocked out at the financial stage and Lukoil was there. So we couldn't do this. This is a list of the companies that had submitted bids. It was unacceptable for us. So we can share a bit more, the department can share a bit more information because people, I recognize they've been asking a bit about these issues. I see this depletion policy argument is coming up, and we don't have a depletion policy. We made it clear, and we gave the reasons why. I've thought that our objective is to try to maximize production at this stage, to maximize production, to get as much resources that we can into our sovereign wealth fund, and to spend it back on improving the lives of our people, because we do not know how long fossil fuels will continue to have dominance. And already you've seen with the Biden administration in place, with the tough measures that the Biden administration has taken in the U.S. about where fracking and some of the areas that they just shut down from oil exploration and oil development in the U.S. And with them rejoining the Paris Agreement, and he's made it very clear that renewable energy is the future. And so we may still have a little window here because of the quality of our crude and the lower break-even cost. But it's not going to be infinite, and that is why we have to do this. Now, so we've made that is, it's as clear as daylight, and we gave the reasoning. It's not like we said, oh, we want to get all the oil out quickly without any reasoning behind it. We've examined, and all the people who have been talking about depletion policy, they're not addressing that fundamental issue. So if you leave it in the ground as long as possible for 30 years, you may never be able to get it out. And where are we going to get the alternative revenue? They never say that, to do all the things we need to do for Guyana and our people. At least to build the infrastructure out so that we can support a more diversified economy and long-term well-being of our people. They don't say a word about that. And some people behave, we are net carbon sink as though we are the biggest polluter in the world. They would not say a word about some of the countries that are pumping out 20 and 30 tons per capita every day into the atmosphere of carbon. Every year, rather, per capita, it's per capita per year. And we're doing 2 tons, and they behave as though we're going to destroy the entire planet. So we here, the key understanding here is that a ton of carbon emitted in China or the United States or India or Brazil or in St. Lucia has the same impact on the environment as a ton of carbon emitted here. So if they keep pumping out and we want to shut down here, it doesn't mean that we're saving the planet. That is why we've always argued that moving forward, we have a global agreement with standards that people actually meet, and that they are monitored for those standards and they comply with the levels of emission. And we will not do anything in Guyana to keep our people from prospering too. We have made it clear about that. So I've seen a lot of talk about environment, etc. It's not nuanced. And they seem to want to shift the burden of being environmentally prudent from the developed world onto the backs of the developing world. We didn't add to the, or lend much to the current concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Yet we must pay the burden and the financial burden of that accumulation. That was not the principle under which the Kyoto Protocol was established. It was common but differentiated responsibility. That was not, but now the developed world had watered down that principle, and now some of our so-called environmentalists in the third world, they're parroting the same thing, shifting the burden onto the developing world themselves. So when I see a lot of these analyses in the media, it makes me wonder if they do have a global perspective, or it's all done just to get into the newspapers here. So that's on the oil and gas sector. Well, let me drink a bit of coffee. Maybe I should shift to something more interesting, politics. I've not had a long time. So APNU has been saying I'm missing and all of that. I guess they're going to get their wish soon. I'm coming out of and being missing. So a long time I didn't say much about on the political side too. So I saw Joseph Harman writing India to complain about Charan Das. How stupid can you get? How stupid can you get? People in, and he's threatening India. You know, I think he had a bad nightmare or something. He still doesn't know that APNU cannot behave the way it behaved in office with the level of arrogance. But it's just an overhang of that period. Now in India, almost if you look at the news in India, on a daily basis, people cross the floor there. They cross the floor on a daily basis. Governments pop up one day and fall the next day in the States and etc. in India. That's a function of a democracy. In this case, Charan Das didn't cross the floor. He voted conscience, and he made it clear. And the government fell. And notwithstanding them falling, they still stayed in office. So he should have asked India to comment on that, because governments fall in India on the basis of one vote, and they have to go back to elections. They have to go back to elections with 800 million people voting, elections that last a month or two. And so he acknowledged they fell, and still they stayed in office, contrary to the Constitution of Guyana, unlawfully, in the period that they unlawfully spent in government, after the no confidence motion. There was no parliament. They spent $419.5 billion of our money without parliamentary oversight, corruptly transfer to their cronies and others large quantities of land at some that they didn't even pay for, or paid way below market value. He should write to India and say all of this, that, oh, Charan Das voted for the other side, but notwithstanding that, we defied the Constitution, and only because of the CCJ ruling that we had to be forced to hold elections, and we spent this money without parliamentary oversight. Now, imagine you didn't have parliament for all that period, And they're complaining now that, oh, we have too little parliament, and they had some sham thing outside of the Stabroek Market, parliament, People's Parliament or something like that. They couldn't hold parliament for a long time, 18 months, and you were going to a People's Parliament now. Anyhow, it was a failure, as usual. So this guy is totally, anyhow, I don't want to call, I've been calling him criminal too often, and maybe we should wait to the court to convict. But the criminally behaving, can't say criminal, criminally behaving, I'm told that. Don't say criminal, criminally behaving type. The next thing is, he also, in the early period, said that he's hoping that President Biden would help to reverse the installation of this illegal PPP government. This was months ago. I think in January or October he said this, since I haven't spoken for very long. President Biden has been in the forefront of fighting for democracy globally. He has a reputation for that. He's doing the same thing in Burma now, Myanmar. Globally, you saw, so do you think that he would not have been briefed by the State Department about what took place here? That he wouldn't have had a report from the Commonwealth, from the OAS, from the Carter Center, from the CARICOM about what took place here, that the APNU attempted to steal the elections, that he would believe Joseph Harmon and the cronies? It's so laughable. They make us look, really, really bad. But it's entirely laughable that he would think that Biden would help, President Biden would help to reverse what's going on here. And to say the person who is now heading the House, the chair in the Western Hemisphere Committee in the House, the U.S. House of Representatives, is the person who came here, Gregory Meeks. Gregory Meeks is a congressman from New York. He came here, met with President Granger, met with me, and he said the president told him he will respect free and fair elections. That is before the elections. And then he was one of the group of bipartisan congressmen who called for the administration to respect the recount and the results of the recount. And he now chairs the Western Hemisphere Subcommittee of the House. So they think that they would have amnesia, etc., to think that the people in the U.S., that's not how it works. And so I've seen recently this, the single thing that APNU speaks about all day long is about race. They have nothing else to talk about, just race. That's all. And so this Bertrand Collins College, this was APNU's, the unit there, the people they put there were running part of their campaign out of that unit. Everyone knows this. The entire media in Guyana knows this. They were running their campaign from that agency. They were spending nearly $600 million of our money, taxpayers' money, to do that. They recruited people. Some of the people who were placed there, good young Guyanese people, but most of them bypassed people who from the public service. If so, they said they were training people for public service. But that was all a front for an APNU unit that was running their campaign there. As leader of the opposition, I said we will shut that Bertrand Collins College down. We campaign on that. It's not a secret. As leader of the opposition, I said that. I said we'll save the money, the 600 million, and put it into other things that are more useful for people. We didn't hide that before. And so now, for them to make it, it's about ethnic issue. I saw some people were laid off as part of the NDMA restructuring. And they complained that, 22 were from Linden. And so APNU caused 88 persons who were working in Linden at the call center when we got in that we built a PVP to be laid off in the first few weeks when they got into office. So they don't remember that, and they calculated, Linden lost 22 million because these people lost salaries. How many million they lost when they shut down the call center that we had there that Lindeners were working when they just got into office. But what is even worse, and how when they sent home 1,972 Amerindians, the CSOs, it was over $700 million from the village economy, and that was not sending home people who were not doing work. They were actually helping out in their communities. They didn't complain about that. And Harman was sharing out this flyer. Somebody needs to help him. He went to the Linden after he recognized that the cabinet went out, the president went out here, and contrary, I don't think Granger ever spent a single day in Linden, and the Lindeners can bear me out on this. He would go in early in the morning, and in an hour he disappears. Never had a chance to engage with Lindeners, but Irfan Ali, as president, went to Linden in an outreach to do exactly that and listen to people. And he made promises. They said they were going to do that. So Joseph Harman now circulates something that the people of Kwakwani enjoy. They got a generator from APNU AFC. The generator is probably $150,000. That's less than the price of one of the vehicles that they bought at the office of the president. That's what he goes to tell the people now, a generator. That they rebuilt the guest house, the Watuka guest house. You should go into that place. If you have a chance to tour it. I remember when we were there, they spent tens of millions of dollars. In fact, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars. It's very fancy now. That's where they spent that, and that's what they did in Linden. And then he said, they returned the TV station to Lindeners, and they got houses in Amelia's ward. I thought that Amelia's ward was developed under the PVP. So that is what he circulated here. And that the PVP new approach is to seek to bribe the people in Region 10. This is what he circulates in the region. Now, I can list, I don't have to do it here, I can list everything we worked on. New hospital, several new schools when I was president, 2 new housing schemes, the water treatment plant, a whole range of stuff, running into tens of millions of US dollars that we built in Linden. He could only find a little generator for Kwakwani, the Watuka guest house, and a couple houses in Amelia's ward to put in his flyer. He goes up there shamelessly to talk to the people in Linden now. So this is what we have, an inept opposition that can only see race in everything. We made it clear. We are going to clean up agencies where you have excess people because that's taxpayers' money. But we have to find work for all of our people. So people will find jobs elsewhere. But you can't sit in a job, whether you support the PVP or APNU or anyone else, and not just collect money and not do anything. You can't do that. And look at the Department of Environment. I can get more work done with less people, but we want the other people employed too. And that's taxpayers' money that we're utilizing. So APNU has this philosophy where you just, everyone, you buy gold bands and all of that stuff for ministers, and you just put a ton of people we don't really need in the public service to collect salaries. We need to find jobs for those people, including in the public service, but where they're gainfully occupied and they're contributing to national well-being. So, so I wouldn't pay too much attention to the ineptitude of APNU and everything to attempt to make it about race. You notice nothing about policy. They can't have a debate on policy direction for the country, about energy, about achievement, about energy in achieving this, because they were a dodo government. And they can't even talk about the future, the goals, etc., where we wanted to take the country. And everything that the PPP does now, they were working on this. Nothing of this sort. So I was planning to talk a bit more about them, but I'm not going to. I've already been going on for too long. So don't waste your time with this, listening to these people. They showed the country in 5 years that they had nothing to offer their supporters, nor Guyanese. Totally lost in government and even more lost in opposition. Thank you. Yes, yes.
With respect to the Wales gas plant and associated industries, what will you say to residents in that area and areas contiguous to that about the possible impact of pollution, and what will be the plans to mitigate any type of pollution,
Sure.
both on land as well as in the waterways?
So clearly you have to build a power plant anywhere. We have a power plant in the city now, in Kingston, a stone throw away from the Marriott. So all of the industries there have to also meet some environmental standards, notwithstanding you're putting them at Wales. And because there's so much land, depending on the layout, unlike here on the East Coast, say if you put a chemical plant at Ogle, the area is densely populated and most likely will be more populated in the future. But Wales, the estate runs deep into areas where you don't have houses. It's not close to the roadside. Then you can put a lot of those industries there where the contiguous zone don't have settlements because of that. So all of those have to meet certain standards. The industries, that's why I'm saying that there are two types of industries there. Industries associated with industrialization using gas and energy and all of those things. And then there are not a set of industries that are more maybe agro-processing, etc. And then some of the land even for housing. So all of this has to be carefully planned in zones, etc. But clearly the environmental impact studies would have to be done, and there would have to be mitigating measures to ensure that you don't have large or you don't have harmful chemicals or pollution in those areas. Just like we have in Kingston, in the city. We have a power plant in the city.
follow-up to the gas to shore, sorry, at Wales. The internal information that you say led to the selection of that area, the public still doesn't know.
All right, we'll share with you because we did the two major comparisons were with Crab Island and Wales. We are looking at Ogle and the others, we discounted that, Region 4. So we discounted that. So we'll share the numbers. I'll share you the report and the numbers.
As we go into the other 4 studies, as the financials, EIAs, geophysical, and others, those will be made public also?
Yes, definitely. All of the studies would have to be made public and everything else. We're committed to doing that.
Substantive questions now. The marketing of the oil, the 28 companies, what happens now?
Well, that is what. We are now deciding whether we just go and invite the same companies and change the so-called pre-qualification criteria. Because if the pre-qualification criteria is set up in a way where you can disqualify the person for lack of technical capacity who's just selling already your oil, something has to be seriously wrong with that. So either a simplified pre-qualification criteria where you can say all of these companies are capable of marketing the oil and then it's just a matter of the best price, and in that context we can look at people also who want to buy the oil directly. For us, it is the best price for oil. That is what we are looking at. Because you have hundreds of companies, literally, that can take this oil and sell it.
And in the meantime, what happens? Hess continues to sell?
No. For this shipment, so that is an issue that will be solved in a matter of weeks. You can just take the same 29 companies and have them resubmit under a different bid document. Yes, I think by the time we get to the next shipment, there'll be an assessment, and you will know about it.
And my second question, on the Charan Das issue, since government didn't officially say that he has been appointed, and you spoke on it, does that mean?
Yes. I thought that's already in the public domain.
Does it mean now that it is, that he has been appointed? Is your speaking confirmation?
Yeah, as far as I know, I'm not running the foreign ministry, but as far as I know, yes, Charan Das is going to go to India.
What was the rationale? Some people say this feedback and all.
Yeah, but people can say whatever they want, but the thing is that the guy in India was Burnham's son-in-law. What was the rationale for that? At least we didn't put nobody's son-in-law.
So in this case, what?
Right. But I think that the foreign ministry assessed him, and he said he's willing to work for the country. He was a member of parliament, and they decided to appoint him. I don't see why not. Yeah. Well, exactly, the qualities. I told you already that there's a layer, in fact, we had this discussion already, that ambassadors can come from 2 streams. They can come from a political stream or a technical stream. So in this case, he didn't come out of the technical stream. He was appointed politically. And so that is the assessment. I've seen some ambassadors who are less equipped than Charan Das be made ambassadors.
Madam President, could you give an update on how far the cost audit has progressed since the update you gave last December, and if there is a deadline? I'm talking about the pre-contract.
Oh, the audit?
Yeah, if there's a deadline for its completion, so government can move on to the $6 billion.
But we don't have to wait the completion on that. As I said before, we, unfortunately, for the first 3 or 4 months, didn't pay enough attention to the draft report that came on the 30th of July, a couple of days. So when we got around to the report, we discovered that this report came in as a final report when it should really have come in as a draft report. And so there was a discussion and they've been notified. So as soon as we get that, then it should go to Exxon for maybe 1 month and we can settle that. But that doesn't stop us moving forward from 2017 to now. They're not, I think the department was doing it sequentially, and you don't need to do it sequentially. You can do it simultaneously.
So you had also said that the government has about $6 billion more to audit.
Yes.
Has Exxon submitted any further bills since then?
I'm not sure, but they have made expenditure. On a daily basis, they're making expenditure. So as soon as they make the expenditure, I assume you have to audit it. They'd have to report on it. On a daily basis, they're making expenditures.
You mentioned a draft local content policy which will be put online for public perusal. Who drafted that policy?
Oh, this was done internally.
Okay.
Internally in the Department of Energy, they took the report that the group did, and then they tried to condense it. And they did not have in either of the report targets. And I asked that they try to put in targets, because if you have a generalized report, you can't enforce it. So I wanted to see targets as to if we're starting low, where we're ramping up to. So for in the insurance sector or the banking sector or construction industry, etc., what are the targets for local content? Because the policy that both groups drafted didn't have specific targets. And we're going to try to get specific targets in the policy document and in the legislation.
And today, the Stabbert Block co-venturers launched an initiative, a $100 million initiative. Under CSR, this would be cost recoverable under the contract with approval of the minister. Will the government allow ExxonMobil to recover this $100 million?
Then
Exxon and its partners launched the Greater Guyana Initiative today.
No. Anything that they launch, anything that Exxon launches on its own is not going to have, you can't come out from cost oil.
But it is recoverable with approval of the minister under the contract.
Well, it's not going to be approved.
Okay,
It's
fine.
not going to be recoverable. If they're launching initiatives, they pay 100% of the initiative. Guyana not paying for that. As I said, with the headquarter buildings, and I know it's stalled a bit now, but if you want to build a fancy headquarter, you have to pay for it. Exxon would have to pay for it. We're not paying for half of the money for that. We made it clear.
Okay, two more things. Has the government received any guarantee from Exxon and its partners that the parent companies will accept liabilities for any oil spill or natural disaster?
The thing is that you see what this has been an issue in the insurance policy. So that has been an old, long-standing issue, and you know what the answer is. So you're not going to get a new answer from me now. Right now, it's on the incorporated company. But we believe that the liability passes to the parent company. Internally, we believe that, the way it's written.
So you're comfortable that...
The thing is that as we move forward in the new licensing arrangement and the new agreement, these things have to be clarified crystal clear.
Okay.
They have to be crystal clear. But we've dealt with this issue already. Hundreds of times I answered that.
Okay,
question.
finally, you spoke about the daily reports from ExxonMobil and the government wanting to conduct its own independent verification. What will that look like? I think I had read something about a data center at the Ministry of Natural Resources.
No, and by the way, we're having a conversation here. You should ask your questions, but nevertheless, I don't mind. So you can get to interrogate me. So, yeah, the thing is that how the data center that we'll have to put people in is the process. But how do we collect it? So we have some proposals for remote transmission. So you put on sensors, etc., on the pipes, etc., and then the data comes in. It could be the gathering of the data could be done separately. The processing of the data could be done by the ministry itself, or we could recruit an industry specialist to process the data to see that it's not normal, that it fits into the normal range. So the key thing now is being able to collect your own data. Right now we rely on Exxon for all the data submitted, and we can't do that. So whatever form it takes in the ministry, whether a data center or a processing, or one specialist processing this, we have not made a final determination as that. That's down the road. Once we get the data, we move forward on how we get the data.
Okay, and the reports on the daily production statements from Exxon were not about whether the government is receiving them, but about whether it's being put out to the public, because the APNU AFC had been giving monthly reports when production started, and this hasn't been happening in the past few months.
Because it's no secret. I don't understand. They're giving monthly production reports. I see a lot of people now saying what APNU was doing. I saw a headline about release of awards for contracts and stuff. PBP didn't post it up, but Ashni is saying we're working on a portal. You're going to see all the information of all the awards and stuff. But I know what they did in the procurement. It was almost zero. So I don't see anything secret about this. In any case, you can almost infer the data from our share if every 3 months we get like 1 million barrels, and that is 12.5%. You can almost infer it. But I don't see any secret with this now going out. It's no big deal. It's just that maybe they have not done this. But so what you should do is you should, but every month the media should request it. I'm going to talk to them to ensure that you get it, the monthly statements, because we should be able, this is not secret information.
Samuel Sugnandan, NCN News. Mr. Jagdeo, you yourself and the President has raised concerns with the current machinery at GCOM, and it was promised that a commission of inquiry would be established. Could we look forward to that this year? Yeah. Especially in light of local government elections due later this year.
So yes, I know that there have been discussions. We're looking for some good quality, like individuals from abroad who are above reproach, so that there can't be any accusation of partisanship. Knowing APNUDO, and I doubt, because if they could have accused Mia Motley and everybody in the world of receiving bribes from us for their positions in the elections, I suspect if there's an adverse report, they may still do that. So definitely, but right now at this point in time, we are looking at the Representation of People Act. And we are drafting now the amendments to that act, or we will be drafting shortly amendments to the act that will ensure transparency in the count and a clear methodology as to how the count must proceed, leaving no ambiguity. So, for example, the statements of poll, when they are received before the count starts, we want them published. We want them published in the newspapers, in the Gazette, and posted online. So even before the count starts, the industrious Guyanese can then go, see the SOPs, and they can calculate who won the elections. People can know that because they'd have to post the SOPs, the original SOPs, say in the first day after the elections. Then penalties for electoral fraud, a whole range, how recounts must take place, because it's part of the Representation of People Act. But remember, Alexander and the others wanted to depart. They didn't use the law for the recount. And so that was the, that's where we're heading now. But we've made it clear, apart from those changes, that with Lowenfield and Roxanne Myers there, you cannot have free and fair elections. Cannot have free and fair elections. This is a red line for us. That the two of them, you cannot have free and fair elections. They have demonstrated every single external group and people locally know they try to steal the elections.
Abina Rockcliffe, Guyana Standard, good afternoon. Sir, I have a few questions, but I'll keep them short. Was there any major financial strain to cater for overall health services in the face of the need for urgent response to the pandemic? With the
it's
additional...
a bit muffled.
Oh.
Yeah, you can just take it off of it, yeah.
Okay, since you had to cater for the pandemic, was there any major financial strain on the government to probably sideline other health projects in order to cater adequately to address the pandemic?
No, we are not sidelining any project, health project. In fact, we are looking at, we're now exploring the construction of a new hospital, but we're looking at that even in the context of this year. It may not be part of the budget, but maternal and for children's hospital. So this one would be specialized in maternal care and children's health. And we're looking somewhere just around Ogle here to construct that. So specialized care for children and women, you know. And that is one. We're looking at several other things. We're a bit concerned that because of the pandemic, a lot of the routine activities, surgeries, etc., have been put on the back burner. But that is not because of lack of resources. That's largely because the facilities have been converted and you have a general slot across the sector in addressing some of these issues. We'd have to, had they approached the pandemic differently and created some specialized institution, then the other hospitals could have dealt with these routine surgeries, etc. But because everyone went to Georgetown Hospital, it started creating issues there for people who were worried about cross-contamination and all of that.
What I'm trying to find out, all other areas in health has been adequately catered for, even with the new...
Yes, we didn't cut health expenditure, but so there were lots of other things we would have preferred to do. For example, to accelerate some of our promises, which meant giving up revenue. Okay. So we have had to slow down the implementation of some of our promises to maybe another year, because in the 5 years period. And so elections probably be somewhere around December 2025. So you have a full 5 years ahead. So, right, constitutionally due then. So that is what we were looking to do, accelerate some of the promises. But we have to delay them a little bit because of these expenditures that were unforeseen.
Okay. Given all that has been said...
Notwithstanding that, we have a ton of things on initiatives in our budget. As I said before, the 4,500 online scholarships, We're not de-emphasizing University of Guyana. You had a big hullabaloo about how we're allowing University of West Indies to take over the University of Guyana in the earlier period, maybe 2-3 months ago. What we were doing is to try to implement a promise so we don't overload the capacity of our university, the University of Guyana, because it's a very aggressive, ambitious promise. And that is why we are looking at the university, University of West Indies, German Institute, Open University, Indira Gandhi, to assist. And they're talking about scholarships. That's 4,500 scholarships this year alone we're budgeting for, leaving out university. And we made the promise that in the latter years, we're going to write off the loans for students at the university, and 2, we're going to make University of Guyana education free. And we still remain committed to that promise, but when we made the promise, we said we can't do it in the early years of the government. So we remain consistent with those promises. So you're going to have a ton of people, notwithstanding the need to slow down a bit on our promises, there are a ton of initiatives that are fully implemented.
Okay, given all that has been said about the economy, could you say if a significant portion of the budget would have to be funded by loans?
Yeah, like always, almost every year. Remember, we still run I keep saying to people that we still run a fiscal deficit. Although over the years, we've had to borrow, they borrowed $90-something billion. And the deficit skyrocketed in the APNU era, but they just spent a ton of money on the recurrent expenditure with very little to show for it. So we are hoping to keep a cap. That is why we are examining the places we are renting, how much we are spending on vehicles maintenance, because how much we are spending on food in government, because those items just skyrocketed on the APNU, and they're not productive expenses. If you spend more and you even borrow, but it's capital projects, then it pays for itself in the long run, and it doesn't reappear in the next year's budget. They're finite for the life of the project. When you grow recurrent expenditure like that, the next year, it just comes back onto the budget. So we are even looking to see how we can effect as much savings as possible in those wasteful areas to bring government down back to where it's efficiently run and cutting out a lot of the waste, which don't impact on the quality of the services provided by government. So yes, the answer is yes. I recall in the early days when we took office, the deficit was 20-something% of GDP. It's now probably this year, probably we're around 8, 9 or something around there, percent of GDP, but because of the pandemic here too, But that's how much it used to be. And you recall that when we paid wages and salaries in the early days, that was more than 100 wages and salaries and debt. That the 2 items alone were more than 100% of revenue. That's how we started when we took over the country.
Okay, and there will be no new taxes?
Well, that is why I made it clear. There will always be tax lowering. What I can say to you, there will be no tax increase, because that is clear as daylight. That has been a feature of PPP budgets, and we made it clear that we don't want to bring additional burden on people. There will be no tax increase. So that's what you can say. The lowering of tax rates and stuff like that, the minister will deal with that. But I want you to remember, that's why I started off, that the rates that we reduced or we eliminated would amount to $40 billion a year of benefits to people this year. That is, the rates that we lowered last year, when annualized this year, would result in people that were paying $40 billion over to the government and collected by the GRA, that now have that money in their pockets, both from the who are paying higher electricity bills because of that, higher water charges because of that, higher like taxes because of medical issues because of that, those kinds of things. They would now have that money in their pocket.
There was a whole hullabaloo recently with what was given the agreement between Guyana and Taiwan in breach of the One China policy. There's some in some quarters who are saying that the blunder had to be higher than Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But irrespective of that, can you assure that the relationship with Guyana and China remains as strong as it was before that
Sure.
issue earlier this week?
The One China policy, we believe in a One China policy. And nothing will be done that is inconsistent with a One China policy. Yes?
Guyanese critic. Vice President, your administration has labeled the APNU, the Bertram Collins College, APNU AFC political tool, and even now closed it down. How are the persons who were qualified by this college are going to be treated?
Those people are different. They went through the college, they got qualified, and so we have to look at whether there was a commitment to place them in the public sector. Because what happened, as you saw yesterday, the minister issued a statement. And there's been a lot of people in the regular public service who have complained that they've been in the public service for ages. They were, to advance, they were required to be trained further. This group, some people were handpicked outside of that process, coming out of the public service, and now would be placed ahead of them because of that training. So there has to be some equity. But we don't have any beef with the kids who were trained there. We don't have any beef with those kids. They're Guyanese, and they should be treated fairly. We have beef with all of the political people. That became a political place. They were running the whole campaign practically, using state resources out of there.
But
They
this
were running the whole-
administration will be revisiting who was
Yes,
qualified.
and the college will continue, well, not the college, but the facilities for training within government. That is what we're looking at. So, for example, Foreign Affairs wants to, or Finance wants to conduct a training, they can use the facilities. All the government agencies can use the facilities to do further training within the public service. But we don't have a problem with the kids who were trained there.
John Ryan, the Evening News. What is the updated status of our oil revenues in the Natural Resource Fund? We would have gotten a payment in November. That was for the third quarter. Has there been any further payments? And second question, pertaining to the gas to shore project, there's been some discussion about how much it could potentially cost and so on. Can you speak about this and also what financing model the government is leaning towards?
Sure. So far, $21.2 million in royalty payments have been made into the fund, and there are 4 payments. I'm not going to, it's 4.9, 3.6, 4.3, and 8.3 in royalty payments at different times: April 20, August 20, October 20, and January 2021. Right? So that's it. And then from Profit Oil, we have March 11, 54.9, June 35, August 46, and 11th of January 49. You know what I just realized? That the numbers that they gave me, it's not the price per barrel on Brent, that this is the amount that was paid into the fund. I said earlier that was the price at Brent reference. Yes, approximately the same. But yes, but I don't want to make sure, I want to make sure that people understand that, because it's about 1 million barrel at this price, right? So that's it. So we now have $206.6 million in the fund, right? 185 so far from the profit oil and 21.2 from the royalties, and then you have some interest and stuff. Interest, okay? But this is only four payments. Huh? Oh, gas to shore, yes. So the project, it's some crude estimates we have, right? It could be below, maybe from 5 something to about 800 million, depending on the design, the size of the pipeline, the geotechnical surveys, all of these issues, and the design. And then when we go out to tender, that's the only time we will actually know the actual cost of it. So it's going to go to open public tender, and we'll be able, that's on the construction of the pipeline, etc. On the other hand, the power plant, we will only know that when we go to tender too. But if you look at probably, say we want to do 300 megawatts, right? And that will be more than double what we have now in the system. 250 megawatts, but you have to build a 300 megawatt power plant to get 250. That might, and you say probably $1 million, just under $1 million to $1 million per megawatt. You're talking about another 300 million. But when we look at the cost, what it will cost us, it should be, we're looking at the price of the gas ranging from between 6 cents to when the project cost is paid off to down to about 3 cents. And don't hold me, I'm just giving you, because we are at this stage of looking at numbers, so it's estimates, to about 3 cents. That is to for the gas per kilowatt hour. So that means if we can, when we build the power plant, get the capital payments down to about another 3 cents or so, 2-3 cents. We're talking about a range of 6, and once it's paid off, about 6-7 cents per kilowatt hour, or even less. And that depends on the structure of the financing, whether it's government-owned or privately owned. If it's government-owned, it even comes down less if we don't amortize the capital expense. So we're talking about 5-6 cents per kilowatt hour. Now we're selling at 30 cents per kilowatt hour. But that has about 26-27% commercial and technical losses in it, that price. So you're looking at a significant reduction in energy costs. Huge. I'm just giving you, we're working through the numbers, and remember the project is still in the preparatory stage. It hasn't, we're just doing studies now. So a lot of these are estimates that I'm telling you at, but those are the magnitude of the type of estimates. There are other people are coming, like I saw one man saying, I think a specialist in the Kaichor said, oh, it's a disaster to bring this, we shouldn't do it. It's not feasible. I don't know how you can say it's not feasible when you haven't done a feasibility study. They have not done the feasibility study, but they said it's not feasible for us power at 6 cents per kilowatt hour when we were generating at maybe twice or even higher than that, and selling at 30 cents per kilowatt hour, that's very, very feasible to us, the Guyanese public and the private sector. Very feasible. Yes, but it's not, that is, we're looking at price per kilowatt hour. So that includes everything where we're looking at it. Price per kilowatt hour, right? That is what I'm looking at. So that could include a payment on the price, a payment for the pipeline and for the gas. It could, but we are saying zero for the gas. But I'm looking at the end point, and at different phases when we are repaying the project versus when it's completed, which is estimated to finish repaying it in about 4 years' time. So the benefits are enormous. It's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer for I don't even understand. And then the gas is less polluting than the diesel or the bunker seat using gas. Of course, it's not fully renewable. That is why we're going to restart discussion on a Myla Fall very soon. To add in the mix, it will be solar, a significant set of solar, but remember, solar is not base load. That is the point we've been making, because unless you put in storage, battery storage, which is very expensive, it doesn't become base load. So we're trying to put in a small amount of storage so we don't have to keep the spinning reserves. And then using solar in an energy mix, gas and hydro as the key sources of generating power in the future.
Some people are questioning how come government made such a blunder or mistake in agreeing to have the Taiwan office in Guyana. And secondly, how do you envisage Mr. Lowenfield and Ms. Myers be removed?
I don't know, but if that's what the GCOM, it's unacceptable that GCOM itself, the commission, should see all that happened. They should just ask for the SOPs that were submitted to the Chief Justice. And if those SOPs showed that were in Mr. Lowenfield's possession, if those SOPs showed that the recount numbers match the recount numbers, then they should just fire him immediately, because that meant that he was prepared to accept what Mingo told him outside of, when there was a big outcry and it was fraudulent, outside of the statements of the statements of Paul that he had in his possession. And then if they're fraudulent ones, that's even worse for him. How could you even allow this to happen? It's unconscionable. I've never seen anything of this sort in my life. That GCOM should not have fired him and Roxanne Myers already. It's unbelievable. Any other part of the world, they'll already be fired. For cause. It boggles my mind. All the commission has to do, their responsibility is to say, let's see what he had. And they care about that, and the integrity and the reputation of the agency and its ability to inspire confidence in Guyanese that it will act fairly. That is what is at stake here. So the guy lingers as though he's God over there. They're unable to touch him because I think the entire commission is worried about what APNU will say. We know what APNU will say. They want Lowenfield to stay in there so he could continue doing their bidding. Yes, so that's a commission. And the other matter, I agree with you, it should have never happened. No, that it should have never happened. I said that it never happened, and it was corrected.
But you give me an explanation as to why it happened?
It did not, as far as I know, when I had a briefing on this matter, at the approval of the cabinet. So I don't know. It has not come up for discussion at the cabinet as yet. So that's where it is.
Michaela Prince with Kaiser News. Mr. Jagdeo, you spoke about fines for flaring earlier, but what is the use of a fine if all charges paid by the contractor are recoverable under the accounting procedure in the contract?
Oh, okay. I thought you were speaking there. I was looking across there. Yeah, go ahead again.
You want me? Okay.
Yes.
You spoke about fines earlier, but what is the use of a fine if the contractor is allowed to recover all the charges that they have paid to the government under the accounting procedure in the contract?
Yeah, well, fines. You can't recover fines. We are going to make a big issue about that. You cannot recover fine. That's a fine to the operator. If the operator, you have an operator, and then you have the contract is with the entities, the three, Exxon, Hess, and Sinuk. Fines cannot be recovered. How are we going to pay half of the fines ourselves? The government, we never accept that to pay if you're putting it against cost oil. We will accept that we will have to pay half of those because you understand cost oil. So that cannot be accepted. We'll end up with a dispute if they attempt to do that.
And does the government have any intention to independently verify the results from a produced water study that is supposed to be done by ExxonMobil?
Yes, that's part of the new environmental permit. If you look at the environmental permit that is issued under PIARA, but even before then, I think we can start doing that because we set the standard, we established the standard, and the monitoring by the EPA. But that's part of a report. And so it falls under the same issue we were discussing earlier about verification. So it's not just verifying production per day, but about how much gas is reinjected, the quantity, how much water is reinjected, how much water is discharged, and what treatment of the water has taken place, as well as what production takes place during the course of the day on a daily basis, so we can have an independent set of numbers coming to us along with their reports.
Mr. Jagdeo, Roll Nelson, around the regions.
Yes.
When your government took over recently, some months ago, they started investigation with regards to the sale of prime lands. Can you say what is the status of those investigations as it relates to some of the prime lands, some NISL and lands and stuff?
I agree with you. Let me say that we're being so caught up with the reform agenda is that some of these things, we took a different approach. We're not going to let the investigations become the central focus of the government. Our central focus is on addressing the pandemic, getting jobs going, returning Guyana to economic dynamism. However, we have to pursue the illegalities committed. And so we did not send the names of a few individuals and say to SOCO, go after these individuals. We allowed investigations to proceed. So far you've seen some of the actions taken. I've read a report about Mr. Fisher, Timothy Fisher, who's a central figure from what I gather now in a lot of the transactions at NISL. And so I agree with that. I agree with that report that I read from the news report that you filed, that he's a central figure from all that we're hearing about in the corruption that took place at NISL. Up to yesterday, we learned that it's not just Ogle and East Bank and Wales and more, that at Earl's Court, this was yesterday we are learning too, that land may have been sold at Earl's Court, and that a scheme at Success may have also been part of some of the initial undertakings. So on a daily basis, their work is proceeding, and trust me, it's not going to disappear. It's just that we might be focusing a little bit more on other issues at this point in time. The same thing with lands and surveys. We've seen where lands were sold inconsistent with the order that President Granger gave to the head of Lands and Survey. He never gave him permission to sell anything, yet lands were sold by Lands and Survey. And we're going to get around to those. There were lots of private, you'd seen some action to retake some private assets that were given away to. So just bear with us a little bit longer. It's going to happen, but we want to do it properly without any kind of witch hunting and stuff like that. You know, APNU claims every time there's corruption, claim witch hunting. Every act of corruption. So Patterson Gold Bangle became a witch hunt, and although, you know, his gold bangles and the other stuff and all these gifts and stuff, that's a witch hunt. It's a witch hunt at the asphalt plant. We just, from what I gathered, they did a look at the MARAD and found over $600 million was paid for the repair of vessels, and none of them were, they received any service. None of the vessels were repaired, and they were paid. And so there are lots of things that we're coming around to, but we don't want to make that the top priority of the government. But if you engage in illegality, we get around to you at some point in time. And Joseph Harmon knows that too. I notice he and Trotman been talking a lot about the Global Witness, that they withdrew the report and they're vindicated, and that this was done, that Global Witness somehow colluded with the PPP by issuing the report, closed the elections. That doesn't absolve them. There are lots of findings that we're now discovering, large movements of money, and in due course, all of these would be made available to the public.
My last question is that recently we found that under the APNU AFC government, over $233 million were distributed under the SLED program. Can you say if the SLED program will continue, and if there will be a forensic audit of the monies given to see if they would have received value for those projects?
I know right now they're looking at that aggressively. So I see some of the guys who are criticizing us a lot, like Christopher Jones got a huge chunk of money. Then the Figueroa, he got a huge chunk. And Vincent Henry, he got a huge chunk too. All of the ones who are criticizing us, nearly $6 million. He got more than the entire Amerindian village. And so why do you think they're so hostile every day on the media, etc.? They're very aggressive because all of that has been cut out now, the fat. Now we've been looking at small grants to people and simplifying the process. So there was some money that has been put there recently, and I think people are getting like a $250,000 small community-based grant. And I think that's where we want to evolve. If you're going up to $5-6 million, you should get maybe some help to guarantee a loan or something like that. Go into the banking system. But smaller grants to help, like, you know, a person who's just starting to do a chicken project or something like that. That's where you want to spend more of the money in these communities. But not to give a few politicians, and these are all political people who are using this money either for themselves, it was a payoff for either them or to campaign. That is where, and that's why it tells you a lot about the people who are the most aggressive in the social media space. These guys, plus the, I got Rick Ford Burke had a big settlement. He had a settlement, receive a large sum of money from Chronicle. You had Mahi Paul, who had been collecting money from about 3 or 4 agencies. He got lost that. Sherrod Duncan, who took some money from Chronicle, then had a cushy job with Ramjatan, earning nearly $1 million a month for doing nothing. So why do you think there's, and then the Henry and the Figueroa, etc. It is loss of the windfall from government that makes them so angry. And that's why they come out and they're so bitter, and you see the bitterness in their social media posts. They're not doing this because they care about ordinary people in Linden or ordinary Afro-Guyanese. They were there. What did they do? They took the money for themselves, Figueroa and the others, and Christopher Jones. He wanted to displace some Afro-Guyanese from the land here. So this is why it irks me that they make themselves out as representative. What did Harman do for Afro-Guyanese? Look at who his friends were, who got all the big contracts. So that is why. Yes, go on. Yes, there's an audit going on. Let the audits speak for themselves. I don't want to say that because I'm not determining who gets charged or not. I just want the audits to reveal what they do, what they did. Right.
Mr. Jagdeo, David Bopana, Starbuck News. Could you comment on the issuance of the trawler's license by the Ministry of Agriculture? They would have released a name recently, but this person seemed to be a mystery individual. And secondly, we're seeing reports that Eastern Airlines has suspended their operations here. Could you comment on if the government is aware of that?
I saw Harman jumped on it conveniently like a carrion. You know, anything wrong now, it got to be PPP ineptitude that the carrion jumped on it. So I don't know the reason why. I don't know the reason why, but we definitely have to find out that. Apparently it just happened. So I'd ask the ministry that is responsible, and you should call them too. From what I discovered is that the people, I spoke with the Minister of Agriculture, so contrary to what is reported, that the people are known, he said to me they're known, and that they actually met the ministry, so they're not ghost individuals. These are Guyanese. Now, one thing we have to make sure is that, first of all, we don't jeopardize the industry. That's number one. Two, that we treat people fairly. But three, that we do not contribute to monopoly behavior. Because I know that some people, from what I heard, they have large number of licenses. There are over 70-something licenses issued to 7 individuals. The bulk are with 3 companies. That they may be not flipping the license, but getting other people to operate under the license. So, government, if you don't periodically, and I think we should periodically review this, it must not contribute to monopoly behavior, because a few guys have this. No, you can have no new entrants. And I believe that 1 or 2 of those individuals very unhappy about new entrants. They believe that if they have a license from government, they must have it forever. We should look at equity in this issue too. So I don't want to support anybody who believe, and the moment Ramjatan raised it, I'm sure somebody bought some liquor for him, and that is why he was the person who raised it. I'm convinced about that. that they didn't go directly, Ramjatan brought it. They invited him. So I'm looking at it myself to see that we do not or contribute to monopoly behavior, or else if a few big guys have everything, no new person can break into the sector. Nobody. With one license or two licenses. You can't have 50 licenses and a man gets 2 or 30-something licenses and you're complaining he will destroy the sector. There must be equity. So from what I gather, they were saying this guy is a mystery person. And then I asked the minister and he said, no, it's not a mystery person. They know the individual. So it's not like there is any corruption or anything like that. It is people, we have to formulate an entirely new policy. Yesterday I was speaking to the fisheries department. The French said to us, they're trying to sell us some vessels, and they said over $100 million we lose every year in our deep sea resources because of poaching. But we don't have a capability to out there. I asked about whether we have records on the fishery stocks out there so we can license people. That is an effective exercise of our sovereignty if we license people in the exclusive economic zone. But they don't have stock records, so they're working with some individuals. But we may very well have to do that even without the stock records in the near term to see, and then the land they catch here, to license people, or else vessels from other countries just come and they fish in our exclusive economic zone, and we don't even know about this. And so there are lots of issues. What irked me is the equity, and I know some of the big guys who are pushing this. They believe that forever they must control the sector. And I believe that small people should also have a piece of the pie. I don't know the individual personally, never met him. I don't know who he is, but I believe in equity too. Poor people must get a chance from government resources. A lot of people are taking things and flipping them. The same thing happened in the oil industry. Thanks. Okay, thank you.